So a very good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's joined us on this webinar. A very warm welcome as well. Thank you for being part of the UNIDO side event at the 2022 Forum on Science, Technology and Innovation. And for joining this session on the Gender and Energy Compact, catalyzing action for a just, inclusive, and gender responsive energy transition. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this particular session. My name is Leena Srivastav. I am Deputy Director General for Science at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis here in Vienna, Austria. We have a very full program for this session, which will last for about 90 minutes. And I think it's important for us to listen to some of the key players and actors who form part of the session today, and in particular also the panelists. But first, let me start by congratulating UNIDO, Energia, and the Global Women's Network for this wonderful initiative on the Gender and Energy Compact. You will be hearing more about it later in the session, so I will not say too much about it at this point in time. So I will be introducing each of the speakers and panelists as we go along. And our first speaker this morning, who will be delivering the welcome remarks, is Ms. Cecilia Ugaz Estrada. She's Director of Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women, Office and Special Advisor, Office of the Managing Director, Directorate of Corporate Management and Operations at UNIDO. She is also the former director of the Policy Research and Statistics Department at UNIDO and has held various positions within the United Nations and in academia in Switzerland, United Kingdom, and Finland, as well as with the World Bank in Washington, DC. So she comes to us with a lot of experience, and it's my pleasure to call upon her to deliver the welcome remarks. Cecilia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Leena. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear participants, welcome to this side event, which we are very happy to be co-organizing with the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition and Energia, the international network on gender and sustainable energy. We would like to highlight the importance of sustainable energy and of enhancing gender equality and women's empowerment in science, technology, and innovation for a sustainable and inclusive recovery from COVID-19 and the achievement of the SDGs. You may ask yourself, how are gender and energy linked? Energy poverty not only hinders women's economic empowerment, it also affects women's health and livelihoods. On the other hand, women's leadership is linked to a better business performance and higher energy savings. However, according to IRENA, women represent only 32% of the renewable energy workforce, and women's participation in the workforce in the traditional energy sector is even lower. Additionally, women energy entrepreneurs face multiple barriers, such as the gender financing gap. The COVID-19 pandemic has further reversed hard-won progress on energy equality and jeopardizes women's situation further. Therefore, to build back better, a sustainable and just energy transition is key. We need to ensure that women's and girls' needs are prioritized when developing energy solutions. We need women's leadership in designing, building, and operating technology of the future. We need innovation and research driven by women. To overcome the pandemic's impact and to achieve the SDGs, we must continue to challenge power relations and address women's unequal access to resources such as energy. Today's event will explore the challenges as well as opportunities of women and girls in the men-dominated energy sector and the role of STEM education. We will shed light on how multi-stakeholder platforms like the Gender and Energy Compact can leverage cooperation on STI to achieve equity and sustainability goals. For UNIDO, the Gender and Energy Compact is an important way to strengthen efforts to address these issues. 8 governments and over 50 entities from civil society, private sector, and international organizations have already signed the compact. We are coming together to jointly catalyze action through individual and collective commitments for a gender-responsive, sustainable energy transition. Dear participants, I would like to emphasize the sustainable energy transition is central to securing a livable future, but we cannot protect our planet if gender inequalities persist. We are at a critical juncture. Let us hear from today's speakers on how the sustainable energy transition can put women front and center as agents of change in science, technology, and innovation. I wish you all inspiring and stimulating discussions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you to UNIDO also for the leadership that you provide in the energy space on various dimensions, and particularly the one on women and women's empowerment. I think that's really wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next speaker who will walk us through what is the Gender and Energy Compact is Dr. Maggie Matinga. She's a Senior Technical Advisor at Energia. Dr. Margaret Matinga is an energy, gender, and social inclusion practitioner with over 17 years of experience in energy and international development. She has worked in various countries in Africa, Asia, and in Europe. So she's covered the globe essentially to a large extent, and is the founder and managing director of Dunamai Energy, an energy consultancy firm which is based in Malawi, and is also a senior technical advisor for the International Network on Gender and Energy, Energia, and an associate with Eco Limited, a consultancy firm which is based in London. With many other affiliations and experiences behind her, I would like to invite Maggie to tell us a little bit more about the Gender Energy Compact. Over to you, Maggie.
Thank you, Lina. It's such a pleasure to be part of these discussions today. And just to set a little bit of the scene, the multi-stakeholder Gender and Energy Compact is the commitment by governments, private sector, public sector organizations to support a just and inclusive energy transition. It is a direct response to discussions during the Vienna Energy Forum of January 2021, which called for the empowerment of women and youth to accelerate the clean energy transition. And it is one that Energia is very proud to have co-founded and to be a member of. We have less than 8 years left before the 2030 deadline for universal access to sustainable energy. And we are lagging behind not only on energy access, but also on gender. Just to give a little bit of that background, almost 760 million people still lack electricity access, and 1.5 billion people cook with dirty fuels. This most affects women, particularly poor women, because they are the key providers and users of energy at household level and community level, whether it's fuel for cooking or their manual power for processing food and collecting water. About 70% of health and care workers globally are women, and they have to contend with providing care without the benefit of affordable energy for sanitation, for safe medicine and vaccine storage, and many other functions. The COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted some of these difficulties that they face. As my colleague Cecilia said, the opportunities in the renewable energy sector, they are growing, but women only comprise 32% of the renewable energy workforce. And even then, they concentrated in administrative jobs and are underrepresented in technical and decision-making roles. So women are not benefiting as much as men in the employment opportunities that are emerging, and they're excluded from shaping the energy transition. And when it comes to wealth creation opportunities, women's businesses tend to lack adequate modern energy services that can support value addition and power their wealth accumulation. So gender economic gaps persist. The Compact's partners recognize that when we are not empowering women and closing gender gaps in the energy sector, we hamper efforts to combat poverty and to enhance human dignity in low and medium income countries. But it also means that we are unlikely to meet the 2050 net zero ambitions. This would be a betrayal to the current youth and to future generations. We do acknowledge the efforts of several governments, organizations that are working to close gender gaps in this sector. But from our experience, In most cases, these have worked in silos. What the Gender and Energy Compact does is to bring together 50 governments, private and public sector organizations to cooperate on two goals. The first is that women must have equal opportunity to lead, participate in, and benefit from a just, sustainable, and inclusive energy transition. The second is that women must have equal access to and control over sustainable energy products and services. Cooperating in science, technology, and innovations is critical to achieving this. But we also know that the science, technology, and innovation without an intentional gender approach simply maintains gender gaps and actually strengthens the structures that disempower women. Gender responsive cooperation in STI in the energy sector is therefore important to actually breaking these structures and to radically reduce the gaps between women and men. It is particularly important today more than ever. COVID-19 pandemic showed us the incredible role that STI cooperation can play in solving some of humanity's greatest challenges, but also the failures when such cooperation does not account for gender, race, and colonial histories. COVID-19 and now the Ukraine crisis have also shown us the importance as well as the fragility of energy transitions. Again, as my colleague Cecilia commented, we've seen some countries regress or slow down in their progress during the COVID pandemic-19. And now with the crisis in Ukraine, we see countries, the energy prices going up and the affordability of energy becoming a bigger issue for women. The diversity of the stakeholders to the Gender and Energy Compact underscores the need to cooperate between formal institutions in between countries, but above all, to cooperate with women themselves, and particularly women from the South. These women must be at the center of all innovations in technology, business model, in investment, and policies on affordable energy that addresses and drastically reduces gender gaps. And that cooperation must extend beyond STEM to include our social science partners. And so today we're going to be hearing from some of the partners to this compact and some of the actions that they are doing. And what I would like the participants to this session to imagine is how much greater of an impact we can make if we are scaling up this effect and with these actions and work together to reduce gender gaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for laying out the objectives of the Energy and Gender Compact and walking us through some of the priorities and key issues that we are trying to address over here. I think the agenda of the Gender and Energy Compact is something that almost everybody who is on this particular webinar and outside should really welcome, because of its significance in being able to find solutions for the many challenges that we are facing in the near future. Let me go on to introduce our three panelists now. We will move into the panel discussion and I will introduce them according to the sequence in which I will be calling upon them. So the very first person I would like to introduce is Dr. Victoria Prushak, Senior Policy Associate at the James C. Rogers Energy Access Project at Duke. Victoria is a qualitative social scientist whose prior research includes analysis of off-grid solar business models in India and interviews to explore the political economy of energy transitions. Her work focuses on technology policy questions around the scale-up of mini-grid solutions, financing in the off-grid space, and how gender plays a role in technology change. I will also introduce our other two panelists and request them also to maybe switch on their videos at the same time. The second panelist that we will have is Leanne Williams. She's lead analyst at the World Biogas Association, which is the global trade association dedicated to helping the sector achieve its full potential. Responsible for policy and data analysis, she's been supporting the organization's Women in Biogas Working Group. Our third panelist is Sadiksha Aryal. a co-founder, managing director at Himalayan Innovations. She is a women tech entrepreneur, co-founder of this Himalayan Innovations, as I mentioned, and you will be hearing more about that as we go along. She has recently won the Women Enterprise Recovery Fund by the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Congratulations on that, Sadiksha, and runs Girls for Rurals and Gambata Sanjal, advocating for gender inclusive energy usage and green productivity. So as you can see, we have three very inspiring women leaders here with us. And it would be wonderful to hear from them on their journey thus far and also how they have come to be a member of the Gender and Energy Compact. Let me start my first set of questions with the first one addressed to Victoria. Victoria, you're part of an academic institution. Why is it important for you in this position to be part of the Gender and Energy Compact? What are your planned commitments and strategies, and how do you see that contributing to the Compact's goals?
Thanks, Lena, and thanks for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here on such a great panel. That's an excellent question. I think, the James E. Rogers Energy Access Project at Duke, we function like an institute within the university. And because of that, we are often, as an academic institution, viewed as an impartial knowledge broker. And I think that's a very privileged place to be. But I also want to acknowledge that knowledge is socially constructed, and the kinds of research questions we ask, the kinds of data we collect, and the things that we measure is really decided by society, our community, our university, ourselves, about what's important and what's not important. And so I think we're in a privileged position here to ensure that gender is one of those things that we deem as important and to incorporate that in all of our work. So our commitments, most of our commitments are actually about kind of the research angle of the work that we do, ensuring that we take a gender lens to all of the strategy of our different work streams, whether we're talking about energy for productive uses, how does that impact women as well as men, to, of course, our work on kind of clean cooking, which has a more obvious gender angle, I think, to a lot of people. So for us, it's really important that we are, of course, collecting gender disaggregated data, but that's just the beginning. We want to make sure that as we're doing research, if we're doing focus group discussions, we're including all genders. If we're doing kind of research on clean cooking in Senegal, that we include men in some of our focus groups. And if we're looking at, the impact of mini grid electrification, we're also thinking about whether women are receiving the economic boon that the rest of the community is. So we're trying to be really active about the kinds of measures that we consider and the kinds of voices we include. And so I'd like to also note that in our privileged position as an academic institution, we work with a lot of decision makers and policymakers, stakeholders from across the energy access space, from private companies, NGOs, to governments and government actors. And that also means that we're in a great position to elevate voices that haven't been heard before. I think that it's really important for us to be reflective upon whose voices we include in our research, and also whose voices we invite to panels or we invite to conferences. So as an example, in a recent piece of research that we did on the impact of climate finance with agricultural technology companies, solar irrigation and things like that, we tried really hard to get women investors to speak to us, to speak to investors who are trying to invest in women's businesses, and also women's businesses in the space. And I can tell you, we didn't get anywhere close to parity. We had like a handful of women to speak to, but I think it's still important that we tried, because the reality is there isn't parity in the space. It's a boys' club. And so if we're at least making the effort to include those voices, that makes their stories a part of the research and kind of elevates them on our platform. So that's another one of our commitments, is to ensure that we're aiming for gender parity in all of our projects, in all of our panels, and in our conference discussions. And then last but not least, of course, as an academic institution, we also work with students. And I think I'll go into that a little bit later in a little bit more depth. But I'd just like to say, our final commitment across all of our work is to ensure that we're incorporating women as well as men in our capacity building, in our training, kind of across research projects, both from like project management, data collection, analysis, and writing. So that's kind of our final cross-cutting commitment. Thanks, Lena.
Thank you so much. I think till the time that we are able to achieve gender parity across the entire socioeconomic cycle of countries, it's academia that have a pretty heavy burden to carry on their shoulders. I'm glad that you all are definitely focusing on this subject as you are. Let me turn to Lian. As a global trade association, what got you interested in the Gender and Energy Compact? And if you can also share with us your planned commitments and strategies to advance the goals of this compact.
Yeah, thank you, Lena. It's a real honor to be part of the panel and talk alongside such inspirational panelists and other women in the space. Yeah, so as the World's Trade Organization for Biogas, we really work tirelessly to grow the sector and to enable it to reach its full potential to deliver the best outcomes for both people and planet. And we really do believe that diversity is at the core of successful organizations, successful industry, and more importantly, potentially in the fight against climate change. And I think all of us here today will agree with Cecilia that gender diversity is so interlinked with SDG 7, and we can't afford to not strive for it. And as Maggie said, earlier, we are running out of time. So the World Biogas Association established its Women in Biogas group just 6 months ago. So the co-founder of the group approached WBA to lead a group specifically aiming at increasing the prevalence, the visibility and the outcomes for women in the industry, and really helping women across the globe to access the benefits that green technologies such as biogas can provide by really leveraging the knowledge base and relationships that we have as a group and as an organisation. So we actually came across the compact as almost a happy coincidence as part of this work. So Katerina has been participating in the group, and she then invited WBA to join the compact. And we realized that actually the outcomes of the compact really align with our key goals. So developing the strategy has really been a collaborative effort amongst all the women of the group and one man. We're trying to get, we also welcome men to join the group. And so through the work, we've established our key priorities, and they've really aligned most cohesively with outcomes 4 and 5 of the compact. So outcome 4 is looking at driving opportunities for career entry and advancement for women working on energy access and sustainable energy. And we're really looking at doing that through increasing the visibility of women in the industry. So we're doing this through a variety of measures, including creation of a database of profiles of the women in the group, showcasing the variety of roles that are out there, the different skill sets that are really important, and how women actually are able to flourish in the sector. And this is really important, not just to target young women looking to start out their careers, but also to attract from a wider talent pool and bring that wider talent into the industry that might not have necessarily considered their previous experience or skill set as being relevant to the clean energy industry. And then we're also looking at targeting, how we improve visibility amongst young people, so targeting education and outreach to try and sort of capture the hearts of those still in the midst of making their big career decisions. And part of that is initially just educating, what as an industry, biogas is maybe a lesser known clean energy technology, and so part of it is, an educational piece there. So those are the actions that we're sort of working towards to deliver outcome 4. And then the other one is outcome 5. So looking at increasing the availability of knowledge, mechanisms, tools, and sex disaggregated data to support diversity. I'm an analyst, my role is as an analyst, and so I really, really appreciate data, I really value data, and its ability to paint a picture. And the group felt it was really important for us to understand the landscape of the biogas industry specifically, see where it is that we're starting from, and be able to really measure the success of the group. So understanding the setup of the industry in terms of, the numbers of women in industry, the senior management teams, where they're more likely to work, what the gaps in the sectors within the industry might be. And so to do this, we conducted a survey of the industry to help establish this baseline data. And this allowed us to ask questions around the barriers that women face, as well as some of the more quantitative data, but also the qualitative. So looking at the barriers, the perceptions that individuals hold, and the actions that specific companies have in place to address these to help facilitate the visibility and accompanying women and helping them really flourish and progress through the industry. And so from that, we really hope to put ourselves at the heart of that change and really help the industry deliver its full potential.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, obviously, biomass and biogas in particular also are very close to women's issues. But I also noticed that you had a lot of objectives that are close to what Victoria was also mentioning in terms of especially databases. And we were recently involved in an exercise where we were trying to look at the indicators by which we can measure progress. And as Maggie mentioned earlier, we are not on track. So this is a very, very difficult subject, and unless you have those good indicators and an understanding of skill sets, etc., contributions, it's going to be difficult for us to actually keep track of where we are headed. At some time during the discussion, if we have the time, Leanne, it would be interesting to hear your views on partnerships with the academic sector, if there are things that you are already addressing. Let me move to Sadiksha. Sadiksha, the question to you is, of course, you come from a slightly different background than our previous two speakers. You are a private sector entity, but you're also functioning pretty much as a not-for-profit entity as well within that. But you are an important catalyst for advancing gender equality. How do you aim to utilize this compact towards your goals? And also, how do you aim to advance the commitments, the compact's goals through your commitments and strategies?
Many thank you for the question. Yes, I lead a social enterprise, and I co-found it. I started it with with the aim of increasing the gender inclusive energy uses in the first hand. So through my social enterprise, what I have committed to is giving and giving an appropriate platform for energy subsidy enabled women farmers in Nepal. For that, we have partnered with the government entity that stands and works for energy promotion here in Nepal. And what I and my social enterprise as an Himalayan innovation focuses is the intergenerational know-how about gender inclusive energy uses, how to use the clean energy technology, whether to calculate how adaptive, how culturally relevant that technology is to the rural livelihood, and how much increase will they get in their produce, or how much income they will be generating after using the clean technology for their production, and of course the income. That is how my organization is committed to giving a broader platform that provides them with the market access to finance and access to energy literacy. Yeah.
Oh, Lena, I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Sadiksha. I think that was a very interesting intervention where you have highlighted the value that you bring to the Gender and Energy Compact. And I think the focus that you have provided on looking beyond just the current generations, the intergenerational issues, transfer of knowledge, etc., that you spoke about are going to be critically important, and also highlight the role of women in carrying forward, as you said, cultural legacies and other legacies, and the basic important role in society and the building of society in general. So thank you very much for that. I think what we have heard in the last 15-20 minutes is a very good set of interventions where we have understood where have these three entities come from vis-a-vis their commitments to the Energy and Gender Compact. Let me just move to a second set of questions that will try and dig a little deeper into what exactly you are doing. So let me start with you again, Victoria. So the Energy Access project that you are currently undertaking at Duke University provides this platform for students globally to connect and facilitate various opportunities, such as, but not limited to, conferences, research, internships, and competitions. I think you mentioned that in your first intervention. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project and what steps will you be taking to address the underrepresentation of women in the energy sector and in the STEM field in general, because that underpins really the representation of women in the energy sector? So please.
Thanks, Lena. Yeah, what an easy problem to solve, right? to address underrepresentation of women in the sector. So the James E. Rogers Energy Access Project, we basically function like a little research institute. So most of our focus is on knowledge creation and knowledge sharing. But of course, we sit at a university, we work with a lot of students, and we obviously work with a lot of students here at Duke University. And so we fund internships, we have a lot of student research assistants come and work with us. But I think I'd like to focus a little more on two issues. One is how students end up working with us and what that means from a gendered perspective. And also, how do we work with students and early career researchers outside of the university? Because the reality is that, strangely, wonderfully, at Duke University, we purposefully don't have a quota in our commitment about the number of women we support. Because if I were to track our resources, we probably spend more resources on women actually in this space than we do on male students. That's because I think at Duke University, a lot of our work falls under the umbrella of international development, which women are very interested in, and we have a lot of female representation in that space. But when we think outside of that, and we're thinking about the kinds of disciplines we work with, which is often economics, which is emphatically a male-dominated field, especially energy economics, there we find that women are often very isolated, right? So when we work with students, we do often find that students either within the university or when we have researchers come in and work with us for a few weeks, for a few months, students who we reach out to, we have like an open call, we have a very good representation of men and women. But when we wait for students to come to us, the students who reach out to us independently, the students who say, hey, I've heard of you, I'd love to come work with you for a few weeks, a few months, or hey, I'd love to come work on this project for a few hours a week, almost universally men. It's clear that male students feel more comfortable in this space. They feel that this space is theirs and they feel comfortable taking up space and reaching out to us. They don't feel like they're bothering us. And they're absolutely not. But it's very noticeable to me that women students aren't doing the same thing. And so that's one issue that I'd like to come back to. The other issue is that when we're working across the world through our research partnerships, through Environment for Development, through the Sustainable Energy Transitions Initiative, these networks that we work with across the world, all sorts of research centers. When I'm working on gender projects, and I specifically am trying to find, therefore, female researchers to come on board those projects, they're far and few between. I've been surprised by how hard it is to get researchers. And this says to me that there are obviously not that many women in the space, and my view from Duke University is very skewed, but also that I think, especially as we move into PhD students, and especially early career researchers, which I think is the make and break time for academics and researchers just after they finish their degree. I think a lot of these women are very isolated because there aren't a lot of women in the space of energy economics. And my solution to both of these problems, I guess, the problem that women aren't putting themselves forward and the problem that women are very isolated, is networks are critical. So we have in our commitments that we try to incorporate women and train women throughout the research project, which is mostly how we do most of our capacity building outside of the university, is hiring people onto our projects. But I don't think it's enough to just do that. I think as individuals, we need to also be actively reaching out to women we find and keeping them in our networks, right? What is a boys club but a network? And we can make networks work for us if we're really aggressive about finding women, and when we find them, don't let them go. I share my Twitter handle, I share my email, I tell them to send me, their latest paper. I go out for coffee with young women, and it's just the action of one person, but I hope if we all do that, I think that can solve a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the space.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I mean, I must confess, I come from an energy economics background myself. And when I started, of course, almost 35 plus years ago, it says a lot in terms of how far we have come. But I used to be the only person in a room full in conferences and events, especially when I was participating in oil and gas or electricity sector conferences and events. So, as you are saying, we have not come very far in these last few decades, despite the enormous focus. And yes, I empathize completely with you, the difficulty of finding women researchers. I mean, so even at once you're out of the education sector and in the workspace, you try to correct the balance and you're not able to find the women researchers. So I think there's a deeper problem in society that we have to be able to address. But I think the things that you're doing are definitely a great start on this. Lian, may I just move forward to you and say, let's give you an opportunity to help us look closer at your specific industry and how women are faring when employed in this sector. So are they doing well? Are they moving up the ladder, etc.? The World Biogas Association launched its first Women in Biogas survey. I understand that you were involved in that. What did that tell you, and what does it say for company strategies, etc.? So just give us a little more insight into your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually closed this survey last week. So we're only now just starting to look at the results, and we're going to also be coupling it with a more desk-based analysis to accompany the work to try and really drill down into that detail. I think it's important to start by saying that the survey itself is potentially quite a subjective survey, so we have to sort of interpret it and take it on face value. But obviously we had a massive push to get it out as far as possible, but it is a sort of small proportion, it's a representation of a small proportion of the industry. So there's a bit more to be done to really quantify the landscape. But that being said, we had a really fantastic push to circulate this through the Women in Biogas network, and it ended up going out further than just the organisation's members. We had just under 200 respondents, which of course isn't everybody in the industry, but it's a really great place to start. It's the first time we've ever done a survey like this, so really great from a place to kick off from, but also some really great opportunities to learn about how we go forward with this survey. So on the first look, I suppose the survey really highlighted just how broad a reach the biogas sector had. When we were looking at creating the survey, we went into all the different sectors and corners of the industry that we could think of. But as you drill down into some of the responses, it really draws attention to and really highlighted the reach of the industry. And I think this really shows the impacts that the biogas sector and indeed the clean energy sectors can have on the lives of women around the world. In terms of, I suppose, key headlines, a large proportion of respondents suggested that there weren't equal numbers of women working within their specialisms, which is, of course, what we were expecting. This, of course, differs depending on the specific corner of the sector that we're looking at. But in particular, we really saw a lack of women responding in certain engineering roles in particular, so electrical engineering, biological engineering, things like that. Quite a surprising outcome was really that around 20% of respondents said there were more than 50% of women on senior management team, which didn't really fall in line with the lived experience of the group. And really, I think it's safe to say that when you're going out there and having meetings with different individuals within the sector, I think as a female presence, a lot of people feel that women in general aren't really represented in those meetings and in those conversations. Of course, that being said, it is a very subjective study, and perhaps the higher proportion of women on senior management teams is probably attributed to maybe the types of organisations that were responding to the survey. Maybe they're more inclined to fill it out because it's a focus for them. Maybe there was a drive to be overly optimistic in how they're reporting. So I think there's more work to be done into some of the trends that shows. Beyond the actual prevalence of women we really looked at the plans and strategies that organisations have in place. So equality and diversity working groups or plans, as well as other measures. So some key highlights really are around 37% of respondents had a known equality and diversity plan in place. Less than 30% of organisations collected gender equality data, and around 30% of respondents said that there were no measures at all in place to encourage equality and diversity, which isn't surprising, but it's quite sad to see that reflected in those responses. And then sort of finally, just to briefly touch upon some of the key themes that really emerged around the barriers that women experience in this space. Being passed over for promotion for fear of or assumptions around women getting pregnant or requiring flexible working patterns, out of work commitments, balancing home and work life. So that's one of a big theme that came out. Other people responded to say that there was a lot of blockages coming from leadership, which were really stifling the ability of women to really progress in this space. Again, other perceptions were, the perception of women in certain fields, for example, operations, and it being a proverbial boys' club, and that maybe women are more suited to desk-based roles. And then a lack of role models and training and mentorship programs, again, those were all barriers that I think were coming up over and over again, and I think it will really help tailor the work that maybe we do as a group and how we can go about addressing those. But all in all, I think we had some really fantastic feedback. Lots of people were really excited to take part in the survey and then really expressed the need for this type of work. So we've had people responding from across the world, from a variety of organisations. But I will say that there was largely, the respondents were largely based in Europe, and this is something that we really need to address in the future. And I think next year we're hoping to expand it and get it translated into lots of different languages to really, really help drive and extend the reach of the survey. But yeah, really look forward to diving into the data and seeing where it takes us.
Thank you very much, Leanne. I think that really provided us with an excellent perspective, despite all the caveats that you had on possible subjectivity of the survey and so on. But I think it was very telling. It's also, while I think you can see some improvements from the conventional energy sector, since we are starting afresh with a lot of focus on renewable energy sector, and the sector is growing by leaps and bounds, we hope will continue to do so. I think it's a good point for us to try and see how we can influence the sector from the beginning, so that we are creating that pipeline of women's involvement and are able to address the leadership gaps that you're talking about. So you do need to have women in leadership positions to be able to understand the internal environment of organizations and create the opportunities that have to be created. So thank you very much for that intervention and sharing the results. Let me move to Sadiksha for the final comments. Sadiksha, we heard about your initiative Girls for Rurals to promote and advocate for clean cooking in Nepal. In many parts of the world, social norms are still limiting women and girls to household and domestic tasks, and therefore also preventing them from becoming part of economic mainstreams. How is your initiative ensuring that clean cooking products are designed and distributed in a way that corresponds to the needs of women and girls in rural areas? And are you already seeing any impacts from your initiative which are visible? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, definitely. The core idea of starting Girls for Rurals initiative was because of the very understanding that young skilled girls in rural Nepal face the limit of opportunities, restrictions due to their geographical terrain, the cultural norms of them being them all being allowed to work easily more if they are accompanied by some female workers or female staffs of their own organization. That is why I named my initiative Girls for Rurals. And this kind of concept is though it's changing, but we have made very much families that do are sticking into this kind of thinking, while they want their girls to go there and do well. So that is the core reason why I choose that section, which is filled with zeal, energy, and the skilled knowledge. And but they have a lack of earning opportunities. So engaging and working with such kind of group, young women, and within a network of the mindset that wants to bring change in the rural community, I I moved this network. I diversified the operation of the girls for rurals network so that certain sections could advocate for the clean cooking. Certain sections can advocate for the sales of other B2B companies who come and contact us. Certain section of girls are trained to work as researchers for us, the community researchers. Our belief is that they are the expert of their rural communities and they know much more better than us who design the project. So as part of our human-centered design thinking process, we try and engage and employ such young girls as the energy leaders of tomorrow, to actually guide and help us in design the clean cooking solutions that are existing, that was distributed or bought by them previously. And out of that research conducted in the respective community, we get the comments on how and which kind of operation are basically favored by them. So that would help us redesign and reiterate the clean cooking solutions that are being offered in the market or in the rural community, be it such kind of clean cooking comes as part of distribution of some non-profit organization. That is how we do our work. And I would also want to state that even myself, what I have experienced, that I'm working through Himalayan innovations, and whenever I seek and support for collaborative or seek collaborative approach with any organization, it takes almost 1 month to set up even a meeting. It is very hard. And what I expect out of this global compact uh, is to help yeah, clean tech entrepreneurs like me in finding the research partners. Like in my case, I am developing an e-commerce platform that studies the effectiveness of subsidy among energy subsidy among smallholder farmers. And maybe this compact would help me align or collaborate with other research partners who would want to work, would choose these kind of topics as their workings. And yeah, I hope to see the ease in communication in coming days with those organizations who work in energy to support young women entrepreneurs who are really looking to enable other women entrepreneurs who use clean technology for their production.
Great, wonderful. Thank you very much, Sadiksha, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in a very ecologically sensitive area of the world. I think action research is critical and essential supplement to research that is done in academic institutions and in think tank organizations. It helps us to remain true in a sense and to be able to capture the real challenges of being able to implement solutions that we might design, which are slightly removed from reality. And your ability to capture the preferences and choices of the target audiences that we have, I think is again critically important to inform the research that is done and the interventions that might be designed for these purposes. And you are absolutely correct as well that it is very, very challenging to work at a grassroots level. So, wish you all the very best for that. And I do hope that this partnership works well for you. Let me then conclude from this panel discussion that we have heard some very interesting interventions from very diverse perspectives. on both the challenges as well as the opportunities and the necessity, criticality indeed, for women to be part of energy solutions as we are going forward. I think it is obviously the right thing to do, the fair thing to do, to have women involved in this at a very basic level. It is women who are at the forefront of the battle to stay in a healthy planet, which is where we are in currently at a very deep level. So they have to be, and they're the ones who are really dealing still, despite the fact that we are well into the 21st century, dealing with a number of challenges of nurturing the future generations, of managing homes, of making choices that have an effect. And as we heard from Leanne, the leadership issues are critically important. They also determine the sensitivity with which organizations are run, by which choices are made at a macro level as well, which determine what happens at the grassroots level. So it is energy, or the lack of it, that is a huge barrier to women's advancement. And also the way we define our regulatory environment, our policy environment in which the entire energy economy functions. So I think having women across the value chain, as was mentioned right in the beginning by Cecilia, is critically important. And the Gender and Energy Compact is helping us to focus our attention on this. Let me, in the balance few minutes that we have available to us, ask Maggie maybe to make a few remarks, possibly invite all of you to join the Energy and Gender Compact and help us advance the agenda. Maggie, would you like to say a few words, please?
Yes, thank you, Lena. Wow, it has been such a pleasure hearing from all the panelists today. Let me just start by saying thank you to all the participants to this meeting. Thank you and congratulations to the stakeholders to the Gender and Energy Compact. And also thank you to the future partners that have attended today. Hearing what we've heard today, it is clear that we need innovations in business model, in how to invest in business, women's businesses, and how to make markets work for women, so that they're not just doing micro subsistence businesses, but are actually creating transformative worth. It was also clear that we need innovations in STEM education, ensuring that girls and women study these subjects and drive the research, but also to make sure that the innovations that women make, and they do make them on a daily basis, in Asia, in Africa, they're dealing with a lot of challenges and just innovating on a daily basis. And we need to elevate this and to value them as much as we value the innovations that might be made in formal institutions elsewhere. We must also acknowledge that when women with STEM qualifications join the sector, they are leaving earlier than men, and they tend to be underemployed, often moving to low-end support roles for various reasons. So we need to create enabling environments and workplace policies. And again, that requires innovations in policies, innovations in how we shape the safe space in the renewable energy sector. The Gender and Energy Compact, with its 50 partners, represents an unprecedented opportunities for us to take coherent and effective action that will empower women and close gender gaps in the sector. The more committed partners we have, the more we can do. And we're therefore inviting like-minded partners across the globe to join this compact, to commit to targets, to commit to concrete actions, to commit their resources, and to work with us and be accountable so that we can create a more gender equal world. And with those few remarks, I'll give you back to Lena.
Thank you very much, Maggie. And I hope that people out there are listening to these messages and the calls and will become active partners. As Victoria mentioned in the early part of her intervention, at Duke, they are definitely taking a much more gender balanced view and recognize the role of other genders as well in forwarding the gender and energy agenda. And therefore, I think this is a call for everyone, from every gender, from every stakeholder community, to be part of this initiative and ensure that we are living in a fairer and more equitable world as we move forward. To round up this wonderful session that we had, and interventions from three very inspiring young women, if I may call you that, we have closing remarks now from the Vice Minister for International Cooperation, Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources from the Dominican Republic, Ms. Milagro de Camps. She has served as a researcher and professor at the National University of Singapore, where she led policy research for energy transition and climate change in small island developing states, as well as in least developed countries. She then moved on to join the Green Climate Fund in 2018 in South Korea, where she worked as a legal advisor and executed over $700 million portfolio of projects for climate change mitigation and adaptation in more than 15 developing countries across the world, and then became part of the Global Green Growth Institute in Mexico as an expert in climate finance and public policy. So when we are looking for leadership amongst women, here is one brilliant example that I think we can all follow as well. She's advised the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit of the government of Mexico in evaluating priorities and developing Mexico's climate change strategy. And she's achieved a lot more. She's currently the Vice Minister of International Cooperation of the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, as mentioned earlier. And she has provided us with a video which will help us to close this particular session. So if we can have the video, please.
Greetings, I'm Milagros de Camps, Deputy Minister of Environment of the Dominican Republic. Today, to talk about sustainability is to talk about energy and climate change and a green, fair, and equitable recovery and progress in gender equality in the context of energy, which is one of the greatest challenges we face. At the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, we take this very seriously, and we firmly believe that science is the basis for the formulation of environmental public policies that are gender responsive. And what do we mean by gender responsive? That these policies identify, understand, and implement actions to close gender gaps and overcome historical biases. In its application, it means contributing proactively and intentionally to promoting gender equality. This vision is consistent with our National Development Strategy, with our nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, and other medium and long-term planning instruments, but also in the plans, programs, and projects that the ministry plans and executes, mainstreaming gender during their implementation. The adoption of renewable energy could drive a 98 trillion increase in cumulative global GDP gains by 2050. The International Labour Organization says that more than 80% of the jobs created by the decarbonization agenda will be in sectors that are now dominated by men, and only 20% of these new jobs will be created in sectors where women are the majority. To add to this, according to UNESCO, only 35% of students in the STEM disciplines, which are science, technology, mathematics, and environment, are women. Women will not benefit from job creation unless the current gender segregation in the labor market is in the most relevant sectors with decarbonization, energy, agriculture, construction, and waste management is addressed. The Gender and Energy Compact brings together governments, private sector, academia, civil society, youth, and international organizations to catalyze action toward gender equality and women's empowerment to accelerate a just, inclusive, and sustainable energy transition. This will support the achievement of SDG 7 on universal access to sustainable energy and SDG 5 on gender equality, but also SDG 13 to act currently urgently against climate change and its effects. Today, we have perhaps for a very short time the historic opportunity to work together and create a cleaner, greener, and more inclusive future. Together, we can rise to the occasion and inherit future generations, and especially women, a planet that provides them with a safe, sustainable environment full of opportunities. Thank you.
That was absolutely brilliant and succinct. And thank you very much, Minister, for those closing remarks. Let me then thank all of you who have joined us this for the session. I can't say morning or afternoon or evening, depends on where you are, but thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much to all our panelists and speakers today for your brilliant interventions. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank